Well, good afternoon, good evening, folks. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Seth Spencer, and I'm the Teach Climate Network Coordinator for Climate Generation. I am coming to you today from Apple Valley, Minnesota, which is a traditional and contemporary home of the Dakota and Anishinaabe. And I would love for you all to share your name, where you're joining from, and possibly what organization you're representing in the chat. But I officially want to welcome Sofia and Abby, two amazing educators here in Minnesota, as well as Climate Generation's Program Director, Kristen Poppleton, who will be sharing their knowledge, energy, and passion around creating climate action in our communities, as well as the importance that the Conference of the Parties, or COP28, can play in all of that. We will be sharing the slide deck, links to resources, and the recording to all workshop registrants. So climate generation does begin every presentation that we do with a land acknowledgement. And we take time to acknowledge the native land we are on because one of the effects of genocide and colonization is that it can be easy to forget that we are still occupying land and that Indigenous individuals and communities are still alive and leading change in our world. We recognize the tremendous resilience and innovative climate solutions that are created by these communities, and we seek to raise up their voices in climate change education. We are incredibly proud of the diversity of our country and know that our vision for an equitable future can really only be achieved when people are working together, bridging experiences and expertise from across the globe. So climate generation empowers individuals and communities to engage in solutions to climate change. And we believe that by overcoming disinformation, centering anti-racism and equity in education, and personalizing and localizing climate change action, we can move communities towards becoming more resilient to climate change impacts. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Kristen.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening talking about one of my favorite things that climate generation does, and more importantly, introducing you to two awesome teachers that I have been able to start to get to know over the last month or so. My name is Kristen Poppleton, like Seth said, and I am the Senior Director of Programs with Climate Generation. And I'm going to talk with you all this evening / afternoon about what the heck COP28, what the heck this is all about. I'm going to be doing a little interaction with you in a quiz bowl. And then I'm going to introduce you to two teachers, Sofia and Abby, to hear a little bit from them about why they are interested in being a part of this this program that we're doing. And then, of course, there are some resources out. I think the intention of the title of this presentation workshop this evening, "The Power of Education to Create Climate Action in Your Community," is in some ways, I think, a prompt to get folks thinking about how the heck is this international climate negotiations connected to here in my community? And I can't think of a better example of ambassadors to a community than teachers themselves. And so having two teachers talking about how they're working directly with their students, with their community around this topic, I think is a really great example. So Seth, if you want to pop it on to the next slide. I wanted to just start out by introducing you to the individuals that we are sending to the COP being the international climate negotiations that are happening this year. We have a long tradition of sending folks to the annual conference of international climate negotiations. And if you want to go to the next slide, Seth, they have represented anyone from a delegation of youth that we sent to Copenhagen in 2010, to a full delegation of teachers in 2015 to Paris, a delegation that represented business to Fiji at COP23, and a number of delegations that we labeled more or thought of more as multi-sector, recognizing that the solutions that we have to implement and the folks that we need to engage are across the board, representing all the different sectors: the legal sector, the business sector, the education sector, philanthropy, legislative representatives, and of course, young people, a constituency that we work really closely with here at our organization as well. Our delegations have gradually become focused more and more on sending individuals that represent the communities that are being most impacted by climate change, knowing that as this crisis becomes just that, more and more a crisis, we want those voices present. And so sending teachers who represent young people, sending individuals of color, sending individuals from island nations and from communities that are being most impacted is a priority of ours. And this year's delegation is really no different than that. You want to go to the next slide? So why do we actually participate in this COP and send these delegations? If you want to go to the next slide, Seth, we really believe that this COP program is an opportunity to ignite and sustain the folks that we send, the delegates who are participants, as well as the folks that follow them, who are also participants, and the audiences and stakeholders that they all work with. This is an opportunity to really ignite them and sustain them in developing actions and being involved in actions. And our delegation this year is a really lovely intergenerational delegation. We have some folks that I think would call themselves more elders in the field, and we have some young people just starting out in college. And we are looking forward to having them learn from each other and share what they are learning with all of you who are following them. Stop. The other piece, which I think I get most excited about, is that this organization, Climate Generation, our primary drivers of change are education and engagement. And it's even better that we know that it's actually regarded as one of the social tipping points to realize the world, the goals of the world that we want to all live in. We need education, we need engagement, community engagement to make this happen. And so this is another reason why we do this program, educating and engaging the individuals who are part of our delegation and their stakeholders, as well as those of you that are following this delegation. And then, so if you want to go to the next slide, finally, we recognize specifically this evening the really unique learning opportunity that the COP presents, and the questions that we can use and present to our students when we're talking about it, helping students to really understand global communities and impact. What does it mean to be impacted by climate change, and who's responsible, and what's actually fair, and what can we do, especially. And so I think this real live case study, if you want to call it, is a good opportunity to learn about that. And then one last slide regarding that, Seth, if you want to go to the next thing. Finally, the last piece I'll say related to why we send and support individuals to attend these international level climate negotiations is that one piece of this, what I shared earlier about education being part of the solution, is that it's actually recognized by the United Nations. Education, training, public awareness, public participation, the people power part is recognized as critical to achieve and accelerate action on climate change. And that part is called ACE, or Action for Climate Empowerment. So you'll see that there's actual strategies and discussions and meetings and policies that are developed related to just this at the climate when you're following the negotiations, which is something that we love as an organization, because like I said, it really is an opportunity to recognize that the work we're doing is known as critical for action on climate change. So at this point, I'm gonna ask you all to put on your thinking caps and not use Google, use just your guesses. I'm gonna run through a couple slides in a quiz bowl sort of thing. The international policy space is riddled with jargon, just like any spaces. And that jargon is actually something that's really important to understand. And so I've pulled out some of them. And what I'm hoping for is when I show a slide, or Seth helps me show a slide, you will put in the chat your best guess about what that particular acronym is. So, Seth, take it away. UNFCCC. Who's gonna guess? No one will laugh. No one will judge you based on your guess. I'm looking for best guesses in the chat. United Nations Framework on Climate Change. Ding, ding, ding. All right, we've got guesses. So if you want to go to the next one, Seth. Yes, you are correct. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this framework convention was a legal document. It was developed in the early 90s. And this is convention. It was what was the impetus, the beginning of these annual conferences of the COP to respond and develop responses to climate change internationally at an international level. This convention was signed on to, if you want to jump actually to the next slide, Seth, that would be awesome, was signed on to by 194 countries of the world, which is pretty remarkable because I believe there's 198. And with a universal agreement that this was a problem. So one of the things that's interesting about all the work done under this convention is that it must be agreed upon by consensus. And so when there's no consensus, there's no way forward. It doesn't, of course, set mandatory limits on greenhouse gas emissions. We don't actually have a way of doing that at an international level, but it was an agreement that there was a problem and that we needed to do something about it. Next slide, Seth. All right, what does COP stand for? I have intentionally not said that so far. Conference of the Parties, ding, ding, ding. All right, first guess. You want to go to the next slide. So I mentioned that there was 194 countries that signed on. Those countries are actually called parties in UN speak. And so the Conference of the Parties is the conference of the countries that have signed on to the convention. And that conference is an actual physical conference that happens every year. And so this is the 28th year of the Conference of the Parties. And this conference is not the only one that happens every year, but it is sort of the culminating one. It can, depending on the country, have anywhere from 10,000 to what I'm hearing this year may be around 60,000 delegates, so individuals that come and participate. And it's where the world leaders most often attend to at least come to some, pardon me, some sort of agreements or decisions about ways forward. Next slide. All right, I already gave this one away. This is sort of a freebie. What does ACE stand for? Was anyone listening when I was talking earlier? Action for Climate Imposerment. You probably have number, but I would like imposerment. Yes, Action for Climate Empowerment. Thanks, Nicole. Yes. So I mentioned earlier ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment. No, I'm sorry, Nicole. I'm not making fun of you. I just thought it was awesome. the Action for Climate Empowerment was developed, that sort of phrase to support different articles under the convention, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, under the Paris Agreement, under the Glasgow Compact. So all these different agreements that came through the COP conferences contain information or directions for ACE. Okay, next one. Koi. This one actually is sort of a freebie too, if you look at it slowly or look at it closely. Conference of Youth, you got it. You want to pop to the next slide, Seth. So the Conference of Youth is a pretty cool thing that happens every year. The Conference of Youth happens in the host country where the COP is happening. This year, the COP is happening in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And at that conference, youth representatives from around the world come together to put forward their statements of what's important, what needs to take place, what decisions need to be made at the COP. And then the document that's developed at that conference is brought forward to the COP and presented to world leaders and to the negotiators. There are LCOIs, which are local conferences of youth held around the world as well. There was one in the US held in August, and representatives from those local COIs do attend this international COI to bring forward the things that were discussed at a local level too. High schoolers, college-age youth participate in these, and it's a really powerful, I think, piece of the process. And because of because of the work that happens at these COIs over the years, this is the first year that there are actually youth that are being were selected to be part of the actual in a negotiating context. And so we actually have youth representatives for the first time, which is, as we all know, really important. Okay, next slide. All right, the word to pull out in here is NDC. 50 out of 54 countries have ratified their NDC. What is an NDC? Nationally determined contribution. Awesome, very nice. All right, you want to go to the next slide? So, one of the things that was really sort of powerful about and successful, I will say, about the Paris Agreement, which is the agreement that was came to at COP 21, so it's COP 28 now, was that countries were asked to voluntarily say how much they would reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and how. And so all of the countries put forth what was called their INDCs, their intended nationally determined contributions. And those contributions were then ratified at country levels or accepted, and then accepted at this international level, becoming nationally determined contributions. This year at COP is the first time that we are checking in on those. And what that is called, and I don't have a slide about it right now, is called the global stock take. We're actually seeing if those things that these countries said they would do actually happened, and then asking them to actually do more. So ratchet up their ambition, their contributions. And that is, once again, voluntary, and there's some great information out there that shows where we're actually at based on that, and where we were at based on nationally determined contributions. But it's a really important part of the work that's done at that level, and how we're actually asking countries at a country level to really think about how and what they will do. This slide is great because it gives some examples of different ways that you would reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. Great. So, nice job, everyone. At this point in time, I am actually going to be shifting gears a little bit to introduce our delegates that we are excited to have here today to talk with both of you. And so we have with us today, first of all, Abby Hartzell. Abby Hartzell is a high school English teacher at Fridley High School in Minnesota, a language, literature, and leadership teacher. And she is passionate about teaching climate literacy through stories to empower youth with knowledge of climate change, justice, and creative solutions. And she's been a participant in some educator fellowships here at the University of Minnesota Center for Climate Literacy and the Climate Initiative. And in her classroom, Abby shares her love of community building, lively discussion, reading, and music with her students. So we're excited to have Abby with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sofia as well. So Abby can just pass it off to her when she's done. Sofia is a social studies, middle school social studies educator and sports equity activist in St. Paul, Minnesota. She was adopted from Lima, Peru, and grew up here in St. Paul, received her BA in history with a minor in Asian languages and literatures, and her MED in social studies with an emphasis on social justice at the U of M. She believes that exploring various windows and mirrors in the classroom is imperative to establish greater understanding, empathy, and action among students. And she had the opportunity to do just that through various study abroad experiences, including the U.S. Department of State's Critical Language Scholarship Program. And both of the teachers that are going to be speaking with you today, I'm really excited to introduce and have speak because while we have over time traditionally thought of climate change as a subject that is taught in the STEM in science classrooms, climate generation has always known that this is an interdisciplinary topic and something that in some ways I think is best taught in language arts and social studies classrooms. So I'm excited to let them both share a little bit about why they're doing this, what they're looking forward to, and then there will be time for questions too after as well. So I think we'll go back to Abby, Seth. You want just so her photos up there while she's talking. Abby, take it away.
Thanks, Kristen. Can you all hear me? We're good? Okay. Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here. I was excited to see in the chat how many different states we're coming from, how many different backgrounds with different jobs and roles in the climate space. And so it's cool to get to speak to such a diverse group. As I was introduced, I teach at Fridley High School. I'm an English teacher primarily, and I teach 9th grade. And so I have a few things that I just wanted to share with all of you that I think you'll be interested in, given your interest in being here and talking about COP. And obviously I'm joining the delegation with Climate Generation, so I'll end my kind of speech with my reasoning behind that and kind of how I want to bring it back to my classroom. But I'll start with a little bit more in-depth perspective on how I came into this space in the first place. So I've always been kind of climate concerned as a kid growing up in California. I was aware of droughts and wildfires, and then went to college in Minnesota, got my master's at the U, and started my teaching career. And I was looking for a way to find an intersection between climate and teaching English. And I eventually found the Center for Climate Literacy, which is through the University of Minnesota. And it's very specifically English language arts organization that supports teachers in finding texts like movies or books or poems or plays or videos that are related in some way to climate change. And so the essential idea is that you can teach about climate change through stories. So kids are getting often exposed to climate change in a science context in their science classroom. But the idea behind this organization is that in an English classroom, you can learn about it from a human perspective through stories. And it just rounds out students' perspectives and ability to understand this crisis from a more kind of nuanced perspective. And I love that the idea that we kind of brought up at the beginning of this meeting that Kristen said was that education is a primary driver of change and that like it can provide a social tipping point. And I think the idea behind using stories to drive that is like even more powerful and an important aspect of it. So that's where I'm coming from. That's kind of my philosophy. So the first time I taught about climate change in my classroom was when I was actually a student teacher. But since then, I have my own classroom and I teach English. And so in the last unit of the school year last year, I did a climate change unit. It was like 3 weeks where students first learned about climate change from kind of like a vocabulary perspective. We read like a couple different little stories and videos every day, like short films and picture books and things. And the students got really into kind of analyzing them from different perspectives. Like we'd read a story and say, like, what does this say about people care? What does this say about nature care, earth care, kinship care, all these different varieties of care that stories can kind of promote through what they tell about climate change. And so we ended that little bit, and then I had my students do a project where they researched a particular climate solution and made a little like collage to like promote it as a way of thinking about, okay, we have these problems, we have all these stories that tell stories about these problems that are related to climate change, but then what is the action that we take? And I learned through like educational theories that it's ending a unit that is about difficult topics, about problems in our world, always need to end with some sort of action, some takeaway, so students feel like we're moving forward on it. And so students research solutions ranging from like beavers, like we got to promote beavers and like get them back into the ecosystem, to wind farms, to the 10-minute city. There's this website that lists like all these different solutions. And that was really energizing, and my students enjoyed it and kind of came back to me this year in the fall being like, oh, we really like that unit, like we still remember it, whatever. So that's where I'm coming from. And then in the fall, in September, I got an email because I put myself on the climate generation email list about this opportunity as an educator to go to COP with climate generation. And I thought, this is such an exciting opportunity because it would be a chance for me as an educator to kind of do two things. So given what you know about me as a teacher, I would love to connect with other educators and get a sense for like, what does climate literacy education look like from a global perspective? I know it for the most part in Minnesota, I'm getting to know it better, but like, what does it look like in Azerbaijan and Zimbabwe and all these different countries? Like, what are they doing in this space? But then also for my students, and I have this amazing group of super diverse students. I have students from Somalia and Ethiopia and Southeast Asia and Latin America, like tons of different students that all probably their families or their extended families are experiencing climate in different ways, depending on where they live. So this year I'm teaching a unit on climate justice, specifically Indigenous climate justice. And so I'm sort of tailoring it to finally announce to my students that I'm going to be attending COP with the climate generation. And so the idea that then I could kind of bring them into the experience and say, like, I'm going for you all. I want to go and like represent all of you and bring back all this information. This brings me to my plan. And this is what I really want to share with you all, is like what my plan is for helping students kind of get engaged with my delegation, like my role in the delegation. I am missing school to be able to go, and so I'll be gone, and I want them to kind of know the purpose there. And so one thing that I think I plan to do is to lead up to, I'm like in day 2 of a unit about Indigenous climate justice right now. So on the final day, I'll announce that I'm going and explain what COP is, and that it's this like global, and so I have 9th graders, right? I want you to keep this in mind, that I'm explaining it to 9th graders, that it's this like giant conference where people from all over the world come and talk about these issues and negotiate on them and make decisions and move forward on things. And one thing that I think is powerful about it is I've often found over the years teaching climate literacy that students tend to focus on individual action as the most powerful form of change, because from TikTok or from conversations with friends or from greenwashing and corporate advertisements, the idea is that it's like on you. Like if you didn't buy that like disposable, or if you bought that disposable water bottle, it's on you and the climate is ruined because of you. And that's something I really wanted to push back on, because although it is important that individual action is important and awareness is really important, collective action is also incredibly powerful and necessary. And so COP is a perfect idea of collective action. It's this example of what it looks like, not only on like a governmental level, but on an NGO level, on a corporate level, on a grassroots level. And so that's something I want to share with them. So I was thinking of having them kind of consider that. What is their theory of change, given what they've learned about climate justice in the last couple of days? And then give me like a list of questions they have of specific things they want me to investigate. So if my students from Somalia, maybe they want me to know like what's happening with climate change in Somalia. And maybe another kid is just like really passionate about Nikes. Like, what do you notice about the way like shoe brands are like dealing with this? And I'm going to be at COP looking for these questions. And I know I'm going to get a lot of trend questions, so I can like kind of have a broad sense of like answers I'm looking for, but to come back and answer them and to show them that I was really looking out for them and their interests, and like that I'm trying to represent them as my students. A couple other ideas I have, and I'm kind of going through the list briefly, and I also want to check to see how my timing is going. I'm like, how much time do I have left, my friends?
Couple minutes. You're doing awesome. We're all good. We're all good. Yep.
Cool. So the list of questions, I'm thinking like students are going to put like a survey. I'll give them a survey. They'll type in their question, then I'll have a spreadsheet of every single kid's name. I have like 180 kids and the question that they have. And I'll be like looking and have it in the back of my mind, looking for those answers and come back and be able to answer them. I want to bring a sign that they sign, like a little poster of Fridley High School with their signatures on it, and take photos each day of me at a different place to give them little updates over the course of the 6 days that I'm gone. I'll post it on Google Classroom and they can see that every morning when they log into school. The mascot of Fridley High School is a tiger. I was thinking of getting a little stuffed tiger and taking a photo with it. It's like, this is our tiger. Like I'm like representing Fridley among other organizations, including Climate Generation. But, you know, for my students, this is Fridley. I want to also do like a presentation when I get back and have obviously like answer their questions. From like, that's sort of my classroom level, but from like a teacher level, from a little bit more of like a school level, I'm hoping to connect with my fellow educators and let them know that I'm going. And well, I've told them that I'm going, but like to kind of do a little bit more organized channels for like, how might I plug into the class that's teaching law right now? Or like, how might I plug into the bio class that's learning about climate from like a ecosystems perspective? Just because it's rare to have a teacher who gets to have this opportunity. And so I want to really kind of bring it back for everyone. And then obviously share resources when I get back and like have an ability for students to like figure out how they might plug in if they're interested in taking more action. But I'm presenting this, another reason why I'm like giving you a list of my plan is I'm also curious, all of you people from all of these different places and these different roles that you hold, if you have ideas for how as a teacher I might be able to make this an exciting experience for my students and to best represent them and best make this into something memorable where they might move on to the next year and remember like, oh, I had that one teacher who like went to the climate conference. I want this to like little moments that like really stick with them. Because what I realized as I wrap up my little speech is I think that like students, you know, they go through the school year and they get a lot of important skills in a lot of different subjects, and those things stick with them. But they might not remember specific days in class. Those are going to kind of blur together. But if these little pinpoint stories can be memorable for them, make that one picture that Miss Hartzell sent with her tiger, or that one time when she was gone for 6 days and she was at this conference and like, oh, I remember that, like 2 years later, that is what I'm going for, especially those moments that are related to climate in the lessons in the units that I've taught, because those little bits of memories come together with this growing awareness. And that's the whole point of education, is to get this growing awareness about climate, literacy, understanding, kind of when they see that next advertisement or the next thing related to climate, they make the connection, and then they're, you know, building that like the brain synapses related to climate change. That's my ultimate goal. So anyway, love to hear from all of you. Love your questions. Appreciate you listening, and I will make the most of my experience.
Awesome, Abby. I just wanted to let everyone know that after Sophia shares, we're gonna have a like interactive slide for people to contribute ideas or reflections on what they've shared, and also time for questions. So if you could like hold on to them or write them down somewhere, that'd be awesome. And I'm gonna pass it to Sophia.
Okay, thank you. Oh wow, Abby, that was so incredible. It feels like your classroom would be an amazing place to be a student in. So, congratulations, I suppose to both of us, but to your students as well, who are going to be able to like go on this journey with you. This sounds, your ideas were really inspiring to me, and I was like jotting stuff down as well as we were listening. So good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sophia. I use she, her pronouns, and I teach in St. Paul Public Schools. I'm also a product of St. Paul Public Schools. I was adopted from Peru and grown up in St. Paul ever since I was a baby. I am currently teaching in a Spanish immersion setting. So my social studies class, as well as a small language arts class, are both in the Spanish language. So that was a motivation for me when I was applying to this opportunity, was going to be able to build more curriculum, especially for my Minnesota Studies students in Spanish. It's a little bit easier to find global studies materials and US studies materials in multiple languages, but state history, it seems that many Spanish speaking countries are not learning about Minnesota history. And so there just isn't as much readily available curriculum that I can take and adapt for my students. And so a lot of times teaching in immersion settings, especially in these specialized classrooms, means a lot of work put on the teachers to start from absolutely zero and reinvent the wheel as we're teaching these subjects. So I was really excited to be able to integrate what I'm learning and be able to give back to my school and to the social studies educators that come after me in this program, and being able to build some more of those Spanish language curriculum pieces. I'm also really happy. I'm just learning more and more about climate generation as I'm getting ready to go on this huge adventure. That climate generation does have some of their curriculum provided in Spanish as well. So that was a big win, and very excited to be using that a little bit more in my classroom. A little bit about me and my kind of climate story background. I grew up with my family was like fairly active in politics and environmental conservation my entire life, everything from family members being in local government to working at the Nature Conservancy, to being professors in various ecological fields. So I feel like growing up, I understood that this was important, but I think when I started traveling and seeing the world from different places, but starting to understand that a lot of places are experiencing similar climate problems, was a connection I kind of started making, and seeing that we are all stewards of this land, and we all inherently have a responsibility to care for it, whether or not we're following through with that. And that's, I think, when I started to understand the harm that was being done between human interaction with our environment. One thing I think about a lot, and will be in my climate story for climate generation coming up soon, is growing up. I grew up near the Rondo community, which is a part of St. Paul that was divided in I believe, like the 60s, although in my article I cite a source, so I know I have the date somewhere, by the construction of I-94. And so growing up, I always heard stories about this like huge piece of modern infrastructure that just like divided a community in half, and the ways in which how we move around as people and build roads and transportation, how that can help us get places quicker, but also can harm the environment at the same time. And I remember being in my own Minnesota Studies class when I was in 6th grade and learning about that, and just being really confused. And well, if we have all of these resources, like why are we using them to harm and not to help? And I think that's where the human nature of it all comes in, and we have agency to make the decisions whether or not to harm or help our communities and ourselves and our world every single day. And I think my job as an educator is to help my students navigate those decisions and being able to choose helping versus harming. So in the social studies classroom, a lot of my teaching pedagogy comes back to ensuring that students are active like positive, active members in society. So that's kind of what, in social studies, that's what I hope students are able to take out of their class. I'm back teaching Minnesota studies. I was teaching US studies quite a bit before this school year, and we would always have our capstone project for US studies be a case study on various youth movements in the United States historically and contemporarily. And so I've been really interested in adapting that capstone project that I did with my 7th graders now for my Minnesota studies 6th graders, and being able to look at various youth movements in Minnesota and youth involvement in greater movements. And I think being able to tie climate justice, which has a deep history here in this state, would be a really amazing thing to be able to do. We start off teaching, or at least I do in Minnesota studies, with talking about the interactions between people and land before colonialism, and then we move on to how colonialism has affected and changed the way people interact with land in the Americas. And so in doing that, we do talk about various conservation movements that have been happening, especially in the 20th century. But after this experience, I'm really excited to be able to talk to students about Minnesota's role on the greater stage. Sometimes my students get caught up with feeling like, you know, the state or the local history isn't as exciting or as flashy as like US history or like a huge international debate that's happening. And I'm really excited, not just to, of course, like meet and interact with a bunch of leaders from all over the world, but I'm so excited to be in this delegation with 14 other tremendous Minnesotans, as well as Minnesotans from Climate Generation, who, like, those are the people I'm really excited to bring back into my classroom to show my students that you can be from anywhere and you can do anything and you can still make that decision to help your community every single day. That is something I'm really excited to be able to bring back to my school. I'm also looking forward to being able to use language in a different way. We, again, speak Spanish in my classrooms. We're learning Minnesota studies in Spanish, and I'm really excited for the opportunity to be able to interview various, you know, delegates from Spanish-speaking countries. And that'd be really cool for my students to be able to hear. And Spanish is spoken in more than 30 countries in more than 4 continents in the world. And so I think it would be really interesting for my students to be able to hear and understand Spanish from all different parts of the world and see what a dynamic language it is, and that the work they're doing is really important and can help them communicate with more people than they might have been able to without it. Just in conclusion, tying it back to what Kristen read in my bio, is windows and mirrors is like a driving force in my classroom. And I think everyone deserves to have windows and mirrors in their education. So for me, that means windows, you are able to see into other people's experiences with identities that might not be yours, and then mirrors, while you're also experiencing other or understanding other people's lives, you're also seeing your own experiences and identities reflected in the classroom. I think that's really important, and I think being a part of a delegation like this gives me more opportunities to provide students with guest speakers from the delegation that they may connect with, or be a window into an experience that they don't understand. And, you know, interacting with people, interviewing, I'm really excited to try to host some interviews with people that I meet over in Dubai and be able to share that with my students. We are currently in our unit, Minnesota Who We Are Today. So we study various immigrant populations and indigenous populations that make up our current state. And I'm really excited to be able to tie this piece as well as Minnesota Who We Are Today. We are people who, in this delegation, care about our climate and want to make a difference. And we can all make those decisions every day to learn and grow and act together. And I'm really excited to be able to provide that with my students. And I'm also really excited to hear from you all and any suggestions, anything you would like from like us educators, if they're, you know, if your class feels like they have a big question they want to ask, and we can hand the mic to someone to answer it over across the ocean, like I'm also really happy to do that too. A final shout out to our Oregon friends. I spent a very brief but beautiful time living in Eugene, and so I miss Oregon every day. And I'm really happy to have this opportunity to chat with you all. So thank you.
Thanks, Sophia and Abby. Oh, so fun to hear from you, and just I'm so excited for your students and for you both to have this opportunity. I got to go to Paris with the 10 teachers we brought that year, and I think that this experience for teachers and students in particular is just so powerful. I have put a link in the chat that is the slides that we're using tonight. And if you go ahead to slide 27, you will come to, I actually changed the title, Seth. So if you actually undo it, yeah, it'll change. There you go. If you double click on any of these bubbles, you can write in them. And so it'd be awesome. And you don't have to be a teacher. You could be a student. I know a lot of you are students in the class I'm teaching. It's really good to see you here. Hail to the Hamlin course, Global Climate Policy and Solutions, that's joining us tonight. What would be something that would make this exciting learning experience for you all? So spend a couple of minutes. And then also, if you have any questions, feel free to add those in the chat too, so we can be ready to answer any of them. So I'm going to give you all like 2 minutes here I see people writing the slides, which is awesome. These are so fun. People are adding things. I was going to respond to, there was one question in here, and I don't know if other folks, oh, it went away. It was a Florida question. Is there a place where students from Florida can connect with students in Minnesota and in other countries? I can answer that, and then we can also follow up with you. I know that Abby and Sophia and I are both still in sort of a brainstorm phase, if there's a way that they can connect or we can connect with their students, et cetera, et cetera. We are doing so during COP, and I'll be sharing that in a minute or so, we are doing some live from COP webinars, and one each week are just the delegates talking about their days, which anyone could join. But then the second week, I believe, I'll have to look, but I have the date. We have a group, partner organization of ours is bringing high school students to COP, and they are going to be in conversation with 2 of the college students that we are sending, and they're hoping to connect with students around the world that are there. And those students are from actually Chicago, from Illinois. But there's definitely, we are open to still coming up with ways to connect students and other students. And so if you want to, whoever wrote that question, follow up with an email to me about possibilities. I'm super interested in that. Any other? Hope is built in part through action. How do we inspire students to take collective action at their schools, home, and communities to solve local climate issues? I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but do either of you have an answer to that question right now?
This is reminding me of a class I taught last year, which was the class was called Knowledge to Action. So perfectly stated, we would kind of the first half of the year do case studies on various youth action movements, being it local, international. And then the students' project the second half of the year was to brainstorm as a collective as to what was a piece of action they wanted to do in their school or very near surrounding community because they were 11 years old. And then make a plan and actually put it to action. So that was really exciting. And the school I was teaching at had a really big park. It was on a very busy street. And so they would get frustrated seeing trash in their area every single day, and were frustrated with the lack of community knowledge surrounding littering. So they did a big campaign, first cleaning up the area, then creating signs, then making little flyers that we staff members like kind of left on doorknobs around the neighborhood, which was really exciting. So sometimes when I think about that, and I would love to hear other ideas, I think of first modeling for students and giving students examples and places to kind of look to for inspiration. And then our students are smart, and they want to do good when they have the tools to do it. So also, I found myself getting a little impatient at first, but giving students the space to think and process and identify something that mattered to them, because I felt like the project was so much better than if I had just told them like, okay, we're going to go clean up the park today because it looks gross outside. So I think, yeah, modeling and showing examples of action, and then being able to actually have, like, we were so fortunate in having the space and time to be able to do that. And sometimes I think that can be lacking, is having just like giving the students the time and having the resources. But one thought.
Abby, did you want to respond at all? No pressure, but.
Oh, well, Sophia, such a wonderful answer. I'll just like briefly say, I'm doing some climate curriculum work with an organization out of Maine called the Climate Initiative, and their whole framing always with curriculum is 3 sections, either weeks or days, like whatever size your unit is, you divide it into 3. So the first part of it is educate, the middle part is empower, and the last part is activate. And so I think the more we can think about curriculum from that framing point, was like we inform the students, and then as Sophia was saying, the empower part is like give them the tools, give them the examples, make it seem possible, set the goals, and then the final step is to activate and to like figure out what you're going to do to fix something.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I'm going to ask Seth to throw the slides back up just because we have a couple of minutes left and I want to share some resources. But I thank you so much to both of you for sharing. And it looks like there's some great ideas on these slides that you might want to come back to and check out as well. Seth, if you want to pop to 38, that would be awesome. So there are a bunch of slides before that. You all have access to them now. That is a little bit more of a deep dive into what's happening at COP this year. But we don't have time for that today. And also, I just really hope that all of you have subscribed or will be subscribing to our semi-daily digest that will give you an update on what's happening at COP and include blogs and photos and videos from Sofia, Abby, and all the rest of our delegation. The resources that are listed in these slides are hyperlinked. So since you have the slides, you'll be able to kind of go in and find that information. We have a landing page on our website that has information about our delegation, how to subscribe to our digest. We have an educator toolkit that you can download from our website. That is a unit basically for learning about COP, an overview of past ones. If you're in my class at Hamlin right now, you're actually kind of going through an abridged version of this toolkit for getting ready to learn about COP. You want to go to the next slide, Seth? Thanks. There's also, we have a lot of partner organizations that do great stuff. One of them is the Climate Interactive, which has a whole world climate simulation game, which gives students the opportunity to model different solutions to climate change. I highly recommend checking it out. I am currently developing a Padlet of resources and articles and videos on COP that students in the course I teach are following, but anyone is welcome to follow. And then, of course, subscribing to our digest is a great opportunity to learn more about COP. This year, it's starting with what I've learned is called a drip campaign. And what that means is when you subscribe, you get 3 days of emails that really gives you a lovely grounding in what is COP and what is the background, and some ways to learn more that our communications lead is for COP is just super talented at. Next slide. As I mentioned, coming up is a bunch of opportunities for you to join us virtually and learn more and follow our delegates. We have meet all of our delegates or more than just Sofia and Abby. In fact, it's during the school day, so I don't think they'll both be there. So meet the rest of them, delegates, next week on Monday. We'll be digging into what is COP a little bit more. And then we have, like I mentioned, a number of opportunities to actually hear directly from Dubai what they're seeing and what they're learning and what they're hearing about. And that's both our delegates and the youth webinar, as I mentioned, on December 6th. And then finally, if any of you are members of or have joined the Climate Literacy Network, there's a community call every Tuesday, and there will be a call-in from COP on that day as well, and I can get you information about that. I'm going to pass it over to Seth to close things out, but it's been super fun to be with you all today online. And Seth, close it out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Sofia, Abby, and Kristen. I'll just briefly say today's workshop or presentation was a part of our Teach Climate Network, which we host monthly workshops around kind of climate change, education, climate justice, best practices. Again, I will be sending all of this information out in a follow-up email. But overall, just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. And know we're reaching the top of the hour, but hopefully we can have a minute or two to ask any questions of Sofia, Abby, or Kristen. Feel free to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat. But if you do have to head out, thank you and have a wonderful rest of your evening, everybody.
Can I ask one question just quickly, Abby, to both of you about collaboration within your school across disciplines? I'm wondering, we're so siloed and it's so frustrating to me. And I think that would be a real huge step that we sort of collaborate across disciplines, social studies, and everybody. So do you guys find that receptivity in your school districts or your schools? I'm just curious.
That's my biggest goal. Like, it has not happened, and I'm so glad you brought it up because I really want it to. And I think my rollout for whatever partnership I do with other teachers about COP will maybe facilitate that more. But even within my subject, I found it's really hard. Like, I had this whole unit and the other 9th grade teachers just didn't feel comfortable teaching it because they didn't feel like they knew enough. So great intention, and I'm hoping that will happen more.
I think it's such a large topic that you've broken it down really nicely. And I think if you can sort of share this recording with them, it might help them feel a little more comfortable, because I feel much more comfortable than I did before I started. So
Sophia, I know
yes.
you're working with your earth science teacher, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up. Collaboration is so important. I mean, if we're talking about modeling change, like collaboration is an incredible way to move movements forward. So even in education, I just got done teaching an interdisciplinary unit with the language arts department. We were learning about the environment of Minnesota, the various biomes, and the ways in which weather and how like human settlement has been affected or has in fact affected the environment of our state. And our language arts teachers were helping them write a letter describing what they had learned, and so like expressing their learning and opinions from social studies using their language arts class. So that was a really interesting project, and I think the students got a lot out of it. And yes, when I'm coming back from COP, I'll be collaborating with our science teacher and building similar curriculum, and we're thinking of discussing the Iron Range in Minnesota using the social studies lens of the movement of people to the range and the creation of mining and eventually unionizing of the mines in northern Minnesota. And then on the science side to talking about all the different minerals and compositions and how the Iron Range actually came to be. So I'm really excited. I'm really fortunate to be in a really collaborative environment, and our immersion team is fairly small. I'm the only social Minnesota studies teacher in our program, and we only have one earth science teacher, so we are able to collaborate a lot. And I think just I was able to step into an environment which was already really, really open, but I would certainly push for it because it makes a world of a difference. And it's really like I feel like I learn a lot collaborating as well as being able to teach other people.
And I think we'll just take one more question, just to be respectful of everybody's time. Ruping, if I want to pass it over to you.
Yeah, it's not really a question, hi everyone. It's just more of a extra resources plug. There's a couple of youth-led organizations I'm familiar with, so it's loosely tied with, through that offer a lot of high level climate education content and on their websites. And then when I put my intro in the chat at the very beginning, I said I'm also the founder of a climate policy resource platform called Climate Ingenuity. So that's a lot of curated climate policy resources for people that they can use in their advocacy or however you see fit in your work for personal reasons. So there's all those.
Thanks. Awesome. I always like to know about new orgs. All right, well, thanks everyone. Thanks Sophia and Abby for joining. Thanks Seth for being the ultimate host. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.